Matt Leverett. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I think we'll get it this time.
Uh, well, it's all right. Yeah, man, it's been a while, but good to see you again.
Yeah, it has been a little bit. It's been about a year since we drilled together. We worked together for Revolution. We drilled a whole bunch of wells together. Started at WEHLU, and we're going to get into that. Then we finished up some wells, in the Anadarko Basin. But most of the time we've been drilling in like pretty challenging environments that were structural, and we just had a riot doing it. So why don't you just take a second and tell us about yourself, Matt?
Okay. My name is Matt Leverett. I have about 23, 24 years experience. I started doing this right out of high school. Broke out with H&P and kind of just worked from the ground up. Started being a company man in 14 and just working with the big operators, and then started making my way and finding some guys that like-minded myself and started doing mom and pop out operations and just word of mouth from there. Just staying busy when I can stay busy and helping people out, trying to drill the best wells that we can, as cheap as we can, as fast as we can.
Yeah, that's really good. It is nice to see that you stay consistent with the work. And you'd mentioned that, it's kind of hard to come across long-term contracts now. It's
It is.
shorter kind of per well basis or, however many they have in their plan. But it sounds like with your reputation and everything like that, you're able to stay busy.
That's the general consensus, as long as you got a good reputation as far as a contract labor, that's all you have is word of mouth and the work you've done in your past.
Yeah. Why don't you explain to the audience, because you can do it better than me, like what is a company man? Like what is your role at the rig and in the whole kind of oil business in general?
I got you. So a company man, an oil operator, they hire consultants to come and sit on the job sites to make sure that the day-to-day operations go smoothly, from liaison from the office to the field to make sure everything gets done in a timely manner, that parts and things needed get ordered in time, and pretty much plays out day to day. Any company man, we plan 4 to 5 days ahead at all times, sometimes a week to 2 weeks ahead. We have to know what's ahead so that we can get everything done in a timely manner. Time is money, especially when you're operating sometimes up to $115 a minute. So the costs are definitely saved once you plan ahead.
Yeah. So you're the guy that literally like manages and runs the whole rig, like all the operations that are taking place. But here's another kind of component to it. You actually also deal with kind of instructing what people to do, telling what people to do. So the instructions, and so let me just give a little quick explanation here. We have a group of people generally back at the office. We'll have geologists and engineers. The engineers are the ones that are running the rig to get us down to where the geologists need us to go. And so, what I was going to say is that the way that it kind of works is the geologists when we're in the actual lateral, the geologists are the ones navigating, but we kind of talk to the whole rig. We communicate with people, which is really you and the driller back at the office, who then get people at the rig to act. Whether it's like put in some directional information. We need to get somebody out there to look at samples, whatever it is, basically, and really, you don't talk to the geologists themselves very often, do you?
Not very often. It just depends on, like you and I, we know each other, so we talk more than normally I would talk to the geologist. But most of the time, it's either through like Teams or an email back and forth, other
Yep.
than a face to face. But
Yep.
it is good to have that line of communication because it definitely helps get a more understanding on both sides about what we're seeing.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. And really, at the rig, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. The most important thing of the whole project is the communication. Are the lines of communication kind of in the right order? Are people being made aware of things that are changing? And this dynamic is really important to the whole overall success of the team. And so, you know, from your perspective, what is generally the best way that it worked? I know we had kind of an open line where we were all able, it was a small
Yeah,
crew, right? So there wasn't a lot of layers involved in terms of who
yeah.
talks. So that changes things, but generally, how does it work? What's the best way? Like an email with a target change, texting back and forth? What generally is the best way to kind of record and get
And
that
it,
out there?
that kind of all solely depends on how up to date your consultants are on technologies. We had a general standing rule whenever we do it. Everybody was locked in with an iPhone, so that way the iMessage would come through. We have a group chat. And while you're at work, it's unmuted. Everybody is on the same page instantly. If information is key, like tight knit situations where, hey, stop, let's get a bottoms up here and look at the rocks here and see what we're in.
Yep.
That's instant compared to send an email, make a call. They don't call you back for 5 minutes. Then he's busy, or I don't hear my phone. I'm out on the shakers, or anything like that. So
Yeah.
texting always works best for a group message. That way, everybody's on the same page. You're not losing information on the chain of command.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you guys use this method where with one of the companies that you're working with now, because it's basically the old crew that I worked with, and would worked. We had figured that the best cover your ass methodology was zero VS target lines. You can have some variation around that. You can have conversations, but you give a zero VS target line, you put it in a report, you send it out to everybody, that's locked in stone. So if things happen differently, or I mean, and you've been part of it too, man. Like the communication gets crossed up, and a lot of it happens at tower changes, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But like you get these like misfires in the communication, and next thing you know, you've got like, okay, well, why are we 3 degrees over plan? Why are we outside this 10 foot box that we put around the target line? So the safest way, and in my opinion, I really do believe in it. We didn't use it at Revolution just because it was kind of, we had our own ownership, our own methods of keeping
Yeah.
track. And again, it wasn't, didn't have to report to 10 different people and then the investors. So
Right.
we were able to kind of like communicate and get it done the best that we could. But I have seen the difference, because it can get wild out there, and especially when we've got more people involved, different geologists and all this kind of stuff. That communication can really become key. So I think the zero VS target line is a great
And it
bottom
matters about
line
what you're
baseline to
drilling in.
operate from.
For sure.
Yeah.
The zero vertical section targets are great, but and it all depends on what you're digging into. If you're in a shell zone, for sure. I mean, if you're in the limestone like we were playing in, it's a different story because they change so much erratically. You have a lot of faults throughout the night and
Yeah.
throughout the day. I mean, it just depends when everybody's up. With the group message, you can get a hold of everybody pretty quickly.
Yeah. And that is the best way. And we all know we're glued to our phone. So, if you don't have it, you should within 5 minutes, kind of thing.
For sure.
But this does tie into more of the communication. We've been kind of visiting a little bit pre-podcast here, and discussed already. We've got the geologists and the drillers, and back at the office, we got to communicate. It's us that put the plan together. We come together as a team and decide we want to drill somewhere, and then the geologist gets activated immediately. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to work with the drillers or land, depending on the way that the company works, to figure out where we're going to drill it from in the first place. Right.
Right.
We're going to be working on that, but we do have a general idea about how we want to space them out in the section. So what the geologist will do is then go, talk to the engineers, decide what the spacing is, what your offsets from the sides of the sections are. And I can go in and put what we call sticks in the industry on that
Yeah.
map, with a structural overlay, and we get to planning. So what I'll do is then, once that plan, which are basically just TVD points in space, X, Y from a map grid and a depth, I'll give those to the driller. And sometimes geologists do the plan, but I actually believe in leaving this with the drillers. You deal with the dogleg severity, when we're dealing with the nudge and all this kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
that's up to y'all. Like my degrees in structure maps. So but I generally give the plan or those points to a driller, and then who will either use software that he's got in the office or send it off to one of our directional companies, and they'll give us the actual foot by foot plan. And actually, it's usually on 30s and things like this. But and so we've got the geologists made the plan. We now have engaged the drillers, and we have like a very detailed idea of what we're going to do.
Right.
So let's take it from there. The driller is going to create a drilling prognosis that's going to tell you everything that you need to order, everything that we're going to need and have out on location and be ready to drill this well. right?
Yep, the
Okay.
drilling engineer, correct.
So what do those usually entail? And then we'll talk a little bit about the geoprog next.
Okay, so whenever we get the information, hey, we have some wells coming up. They're going to be XXX wells in this formation, blah blah blah. They'll set a date for a meet. We'll come in. He'll have an idea mapped up of a drilling prog. Then we'll get with the directional team. We'll run. He'll have how he wants to do the lateral or how he wants to land the curve. That'll all be in there. Whether we're going to have to nudge out on the surface, it'll have. Most of the time, we talk about torque and drag. A lot of times we in vertical, you can do a lot of crazy stuff now. A lot of the nudges kick out 10 to 12 to 15 degrees and go straight down. And then that way you can have 4 to 5 to 6 well pads on a pad. So then we'll get down to the curve. A lot of times nowadays, I've seen most of the curves that people build are between 10 to 12 degrees. They keep them pretty simple.
Yep.
Before we were cranking them, you'd have 15, 18 degree dogleg severities. They were pretty nasty, but we're doing a lot of different things now with a lot more turns in the lateral versus what we used to.
Yeah, I would
When
say
you're
that's definitely true. Now, I don't think you've ever done one. Maybe you have. Have you done one of those U-turn deals yet?
complete turns, yeah.
Okay.
What started off, we did a few of those a long time ago, the little S curves, and then they were like, well, we can go all the way around. I've heard of some guys doing some 3 miles that are tying into those now. So
That's pretty
they're
cool,
going,
dude.
yeah. I mean,
Pretty cool.
there's a lot of stuff goes into it, but long story short, they get with us. We talk about what we can do and what we think we can't do, and just challenges, and we try to plan ahead.
That's awesome. And so that's kind of the mechanical side of the equation. This is the nuts and bolts of the machinery that's going to get us to where we need to go, which is really needs an explanation once we get down there from the geologist side to be able to talk about hazards, what to expect, like what angles we're going to be going at, when can we see target changes and things like that. So you're one of the few people, like I actually rarely the geologist sees the drilling prog. I could go and dig into the folder, but again, that's not my lane. Miles or my the driller there actually does kind of look more at the geologic prognosis than I would his. And so we've got these two kind of things where we have to again blend the worlds together. We've got the drillers and then we've got the geologists, and it's a matter of communication. So the geoprognosis is going to be the thing that tells you guys when you're on your way down what formations to expect. Like if there's another zone like that's a sandstone that's going to have shows in it, these sorts of things, and be able to give everybody a heads up. Those are our vertical tops on our way down. But then we've
Correct.
also got to we generally in the geoprog are going to give you an idea of what the drilling plan looks like. Now, I think some people probably just send you like target line numbers, maybe like a little generic thing. But that's one thing that I actually found really worked well for me was to get a little bit more descriptive and pre-drill these wells ahead of time to where now the drillers and everybody knows really what to expect. Like if there's some faults, usually I'd give like an uncertainty boundary around it
Yeah,
and like an idea of like, hey, what to expect. Or if there's any special instructions, we crossed this one before and we had total loss circulation, just be ready for that. Or,
for sure.
and sometimes we had things that, we were expecting a fault and it was just a dip change. It was a
Right.
bad dip change, but it
Yeah.
wasn't,
Well,
there was just
either
a
way,
lot
it
of
helps.
uncertainty. But that geoprog allows you guys to know ahead of time,
Right.
right?
And it does. It allows because we have 4 guys that we watch constantly. Our drillers that we have out there. You'll have 2 that relieve another 2, and we usually have them for a week to 2 weeks at a time. Well, that way we can have a morning meeting with them and an afternoon meeting with them and let them know what's coming ahead on their 12-hour tower. Like, hey, at this depth we have this, and we can print those pictures out. With any roughnecks, they understand pictures a lot more than verbiage. So
That's what I was thinking the whole time. So, and really, this is a slight push for me. I'm doing this podcast really to get information out there and people like you on here. But like, I do think that I kind of offer something here with the way that the information I provided not only before but during the drilling process that I do think made a difference in the really challenging field that we worked in at West Edmond Hunt and
yeah,
Lymute.
for sure.
So what, in your own words, like kind of what would you say is the difference between some of your status quo, less informative geoprogs and something coming from, kind of, I know I'm not the only one, but like kind of, people that are putting together a little bit more informative packages for everybody.
Running 2 to 3 interps. So, like, say, because a lot of times that you're not really sure, especially if there's a lot of changes in the well,
Hmm.
having access to all three of those interps really helps because, if we don't see this here on one of it could be the third interpretation that we're looking at, and having access to those and not waiting and finding out, well, we didn't see that, we didn't see that. But
Okay.
as soon as we see where it comes in, that really helps because we know which one to follow instantly.
So
You know,
that's something nice that you like to have from geosteers is
correct.
alternate interpretations available, particularly when you're in places where we're
Yeah.
not exactly sure what's happening.
For
Okay.
sure, because that way I'm ready for all three things or four things that can happen. Not just what we think is going to happen and then it doesn't, and then we just seem like we're all lost.
Do you
Like
get
so.
that very often?
Yes. No,
Okay.
I'm not.
So,
I don't get the interps. No,
oh,
I
you don't
usually
get
get
the
you get
multiple
one,
interps.
and then
Okay.
you're like, "What the hell?" And then you talk to them, like, "Well, we were running these two in the background, and we're
Yeah.
still really not sure. Well, why didn't I know about those beforehand?" And that's where you get into that. Like,
And again, that
we
kind of
like to
boils
know what you
down.
know. Yeah,
You don't
instantly.
talk directly to the geologist a lot of the time. You got to kind
Correct.
of, in Spanish, traducir,
Yeah,
translate through the driller and over.
for sure.
So what's another thing that you like to see from geosteers? And we're going to get into some of the stuff that you hate. So what's another good thing or some productive steps that geosteers can take to make it easier on drillers?
Just the drilling team in general needs to have first line of communication with the geo team because they really do run hand in hand. Like if your geo team is fucked, everybody is.
Yeah,
If they don't have a good idea about what's going on down there, you're just driving blind.
yeah.
So I mean, just good communication is what we like to have. Hey, we're expecting this. This is our target zones. I don't expect any changes through the night, but this is where we expect to be in the morning. Like,
Yeah.
just give us a target.
Yeah. Well, and WEHLU was one of those like 24-hour gigs, like that
Yeah,
had so much uncertainty to it. Like, I hardly slept. Dude, my sleep is still like a little bit off from it in a way, like,
for
because,
sure.
a lot of the time, just depending, it was either going too slow or whatever, I'd be up until 11 o'clock waiting for the last one. Miles and Matt right there too, dude.
Yeah,
Boom, boom,
sure.
what's happening, Keith? And I get that last survey whenever that comes, then I try to go to sleep and, hopefully nothing happens, but, you never
Yeah.
know. And like a
You know
lot
what
of the
they,
time,
yeah,
it wasn't uncertainty I was getting calls about, the wake up calls. It was more like, dude, the bid is dropping, or like it's
yeah,
still building, it's at like 95 degrees right now. And, we've been trying to slap it down for six stands. So,
yeah.
we had some unique challenges there, but, our communication is staying up and staying 24 hours and being able to, like, if you had a problem, you could text me right away, you know?
Correct.
And
For the first
so,
line of communication was really key to doing those. Like, because if I can't, because everybody was running on E for weeks and weeks at a
yeah.
time. There was very seldom that you had a weekend off.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I never did. I mean, I
No.
was honestly, Matt, I issued a target change. I had to walk out of my mom's funeral, dude.
Yeah.
Like straight up, dude. Like, okay, we were having some kind of
Yeah.
deal go on. I had to walk out, call Dylan and be
For
like, look,
sure.
dude, like this is the way it is. We got to slap it down. Let's go. And that's just life. And and I do want to touch on this. I have a friend, I'm not going to say his name because he works for a big company, but he had a challenge where he's kind of in a management type position now at this company where kind of like me, where he's got a crew underneath him and they do use consultants, but you've got the geologist kind of running the show, calling shots, making the final call, update,
Right.
whatever. Um, but this is the truth, dude. He wanted to go on vacation. And I was thinking, like, okay.
Yeah.
And like sure enough, dude, like I was just, he got out there, they have some trouble, like this, that, this, that, and the third for sure, right? Of course. And so, he's like, I'm on the phone or whatever. And I was just like, buddy, dude, you don't ever get to leave your phone off, bud. Like, I don't care. Like, you can go on vacation, but they better be able to get in touch with you because you can never leave an operations gig. Like
No.
you're
You're
entangled
married.
until that rig is rusting over somewhere.
Unless it's on a rig move, you're married to that job until it's done.
24, dude.
Yeah.
So
I missed both of my girls' proms, their first, their dances throughout that whole segment that we were doing. I
Yep.
did make graduation, but their senior proms, I missed out on all that stuff.
That's the
Dances,
life in
everything.
this business, though. It's
Yeah,
got big returns, but there's sacrifices that have to be made. I'm actually, I have particular guests that I'm having coming on that are going to address this. Like say, women geologists that have kids that they have to take care of, or
yeah,
like there's, it's a big deal, and I just met this new person that really had some insight on it. I'm really excited to talk about that because it does factor in men and women both.
right,
I see these geosteers. In fact, I had an issue today being able to get one on because of family stuff,
right,
or because he had to cover for somebody who had family stuff, and these are the men that are caregiving for their children during the day. So there's some really interesting topics to kind of delve in here with, to get into with that. But
yeah,
from our standpoint, this is it's a hard job, but the reward is really good. And at the end of the day, it is nice to have like the kind of financial security and some of the other things that we've been able
for
to
sure.
gain from this business that we work in.
And you sacrifice your time for money. I mean, that's
Yeah,
what that's the trade off at the end of the day. They get part of your life, you
yep,
get a decent wage, and that's the trade off.
absolutely. So, what are some of the things that geosteers do that are the absolute worst? Like grinds your gears? Like, what do we need to stop doing to make it easier? And just really quick, is there an issue sometimes with the geologists not being able to explain themselves in like an engineering way or in a simple and straightforward manner? You can
Yeah.
delve into that.
For sure. Simple and straightforward is always going to be your best, and always be just truthful. I mean, if you're not 100% sure, just be 100% like, hey, like we're really not sure here, but I have this second interp. I'm hoping, or I'll have a second interp out tomorrow. Like, don't make us think that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
The second part is, when we call, answer, or have somebody available to answer, because like those guys that go on vacation, or don't tell nobody, we'll get an email that says they're going on vacation, blah, blah, blah. But then you have a third party looking after it that's running like StarSteer or something in the background that they
Yep.
don't answer their phone. All they
No.
are is answering. They're just waiting for MWD emails to come through and surveys. But nobody's, and say if you run into something, hey, I lost circulation here. Why did I lose circulation here?
Yeah.
And that's the good thing about having your data in the drilling progs. I know when I'm passing other well paths,
That was the
so
other thing, right? Where are your collision
yeah,
hazards and these kinds of
correct.
things, right?
If it's a depleted zone, I know what's ahead. I don't have to ask you what's ahead. I can already see it. We're going within 100 foot of this other depleted zone. It's fractured out. So it was drilled in the 90s, early 80s, or whatever.
Yep.
So that gives us an idea. But those are just the little things. Just when it stems down to it, it's just communication between the
Yeah.
drilling team and the geology team. Like those are the guys that make or break it. They can make a company or break a company.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Like geosteering is one of the, I'm going to say this probably every podcast, but like geosteering, in my opinion, and you work with them, it's a somewhat underappreciated job relative to how important it actually is.
correct.
Companies' fortunes can ride and die on a couple degrees difference
Yeah.
and cost. I mean, you stick a tool, you do anything, you're out of zone, you're going to pump you may get stuck, you not may be able, not be able to get your frac off. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
variables that really ride on this position that, I just think that it's time to be able out here discussing these things
Yeah.
and to kind of get, people thinking about the best way to operate in this space. So,
And it is, and it's
um,
all about your people. At the end of the day, people make or break you. Like, and once a lot of those companies figure that out, like if you have the right people on your team, like you can really be successful at a lot of things.
it makes a big difference.
It does.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we got a pretty good little show here, bud. Do you think you have anything else you want to add at the end?
No, man, it was good talking to you. Just always have communication, communication. So,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hey, dude, thank you so much for coming on, man. I hope I get to drill some wells with you here pretty soon. Hint,
hope
hint,
so.
WWW investments. But
Yeah, we'll be
anyway,
in touch.
we'll see what happens. I had to be turning to the right here pretty soon, I hope. But in the meantime, please, those of you watching the show, subscribe to my channel, hit the like, and make sure you hit the notification button as well. I'm looking for geologists and geosteerers to come on the show, geosteerers in particular, want to talk tips and tricks. So for those of you out here there that are interested, please go to my website. It's www thegrizzledgeologist.com. It's linked in the description. And for all of you drillers out there, don't go too deep. Until then, we'll see you. Thank you.
You have to work for it. Don't be